Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya
Okay, but let's do one thing.
Subhadra.
So turning it on, let's look
Jagannatha,
at it this way.
Jaya
Have you used tablet
Jaya
also?
Subhadra. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva,
Sorry.
Jaya
So what are you doing?
Subhadra, Jaya
Okay.
Jagannatha, Jaya
Translate this into
Jagannatha,
characters.
Jaya Baladeva, Jaya
Done.
Subhadra. Jaya Laddu Gopala, Jaya
Let's start
Laddu
with first thing.
Gopala.
First things first is if I'm looking down, this will keep moving down with me. So in that sense, the inconsistency will not be there. So yesterday the quality
Hari
problem was because of my movie head,
Bol,
that
Hari
something else was problem.
Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
So let me look at this now.
Nitai Gaura Hari
So
Bol, Hari
just let me understand. What
Bol,
does this is the
Hari
wireless
Bol,
transmitter?
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Hari
Okay, and that receiver
Bol,
goes where?
Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
And then so we are not giving a direct input to the laptop. The laptop is taking basically from the amplifier. Okay, so let me understand this. Says okay. The current system we have is, say if this is the speaker, on, and then here we have the second device, and here is the amplifier. And from here, what is the connection? XLR. Okay. So and this is wireless. Oh, our conversation is muted. Sorry. Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna. It's okay. We can just assume it's Jaya there every single time. Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinatha Madana Mohan Govinda Gopinatha Madana Mohan Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Jamuna Jaya Jaya Mahavan Kalindi Jamuna Jaya Jaya Mahan Keshighatavam Shivata Dvadashakanan Ghatavam Shivata Dvadashakanan Jaha Saba Leela Koilo Shri Nandanandan Saba Leela Koilo Jaha Saba Leela Koilo Shri Nandanandan Jaha Saba Leela Koilo Shri Nandanandan Shri Nanda Jashoda Jaya Jaya Gopagana Yashoda Jaya Jaya Gopagana Shri Damadi Denuvatsagana Jaya Jaya Januvatsagan Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan De Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Jaya Brish Kirtida Sundari Jaya Vrishabhanu Jaya Kirtida Sundari Jaya Abhiranagari Asi Jaya Abhiranagari Jaya Paurna अभिरना गरी जय पौर्णमासी जय 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 गोपीश्वर वृंदावन माज जय गोपीश्वर वृंदावन माज जय जय सखा बटु द्विजरा जय राम घाट जय रोहिणी नंदन जय रोहिणी नंदन जय जय वृंदावन वासी जत जन वासी जत जन जय जय वृंदावन वासी जत जन वृंदावन वासी जत जन जय द्विज पत्नी जय नाग कन्यागण जय नाग कन्यागण भक्ति तेजाहार पैलो गोविंद चरण जय राधे जय कृष्ण जय वृंदावन राधे जय वृंदावन श्री गोविंद गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन मदन श्री रसमंडल जय जय राधा श्याम श्याम जय जय रस लीला सर्वमनोरम लीला सर्वमनोरम जय जयोज्ज्वल रस सार जयोज्ज्वल रस पर किया भावे जहा ब्रजते प्रचार ब्रजते प्रचार पर किया भावे जहा ब्रजते प्रचार परकीया भावे जहा ब्रजेते प्रचार श्री जानवा पाद पद्मा करिया स्मरण पाद पद्मा करिया स्मरण दीन कृष्ण दास को नाम संकीर्तन दीन कृष्ण दास को है नाम संकीर्तन न दास को है नाम जय राधे जय कृष्ण जय वृंदावन जय राधे जय कृष्ण जय वृंदावन जय राधे जय कृष्ण जय वृंदावन श्री गोविंद गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन गोपीनाथ मदन मोहन जय हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 जय राधे श्याम जय राधे श्याम जय राधे श्याम जय वृंदावन धाम राधे श्याम जय राधे श्याम जय वृंदावन धाम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Jaya Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Madan Mohan Radhe. Jaya Radha Madan Radhe. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Now Govind Prabhu.
अरे वो यहाँ तो उधर से करो. हरे कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण अरे हरे कृष्ण शायद गेम करना. उनके साथ बैठा है. हरे कृष्ण आवाज आवाज नहीं आ रही. आवाज नहीं आ रही. आवाज इसको I think maybe direction. Oh, okay, direction. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. बोलिए बोलिए. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. बोलिए बोलिए भाई. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Wi-Fi?
Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,
Password?
Krishna
Nitai, all small letters.
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram,
Meeting ID.
Ram Ram, Hare Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare
6.9.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Password is
Ram,
Krishna.
Ram Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram
All small case Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama Rama, Hare Hare. हरे राम संकीर्तन कीजिए.
Beautiful. Yeah. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Tarini Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Radhara Shrivasadi Gaurav I'll be connecting various sections of the Bhagavad Gita from the perspective of Arjuna's dilemma. So we can analyze the Gita from various perspectives, but if we keep it at the ground level is Arjuna has a particular question. So, for example, we may say that can all the verses of the Bhagavad Gita be related to Arjuna's ground level dilemma? So, if we consider, say, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati. Now, what does this mean for Arjuna on the battlefield? Does Krishna want Arjuna to offer a flower and a fruit? What does it mean? So, some verses, they may be easy to relate with the context. Some verses may be a little more difficult to relate with the context. And we can actually connect all verses, but it requires different levels of analytical exploration. But I will divide the sections of the Gita from the perspective of how Krishna is addressing Arjuna's question. So one of the most common questions which faces people on the devotional path. So this is a devotional. It's a devotional perplexity. Is this clear to you? It's visible. So the most common devotional perplexity is that it is called as the problem of evil. Does anyone know what is this problem of evil? Or it is not a problem for you? Red? Is it? Red pen? I don't want to feel like a professor, teacher correcting students. Okay. Is this better? Interesting. Would white work better or? It's okay. This become a color exploration instead of Gita exploration. Okay. Why is it not giving the color choices? That's strange. Let's see if this is okay. Here it is coming. Better? Exploration. Okay, fine. Okay. So what is the problem of evil? You are saying something, bro? Yeah. Yes. So there's a if God is good, filled with suffering. So how do we reconcile these two? God's goodness with the world's despotism, with the world's distress. That is a fundamental question which defies easy answers. This is better. Okay. So now this question is very much there for Arjuna, especially if we are talking about devotion to God. Then implicit in devotion to God is the idea of the controllership of God. So if God is in control, then how can God allow bad things to happen? Why does God let these bad things keep happening? So Krishna in this section addresses that question. So in the first 3 verses, Krishna talks about, first mentions that how this knowledge, if one understands it, this is the king of knowledge, Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. If one attends this, then one can become liberated. That idam tute guhyatamam pravaksham in guhyatamam, most confidential knowledge. So he is highlighting the importance of the knowledge. And then from the 4th verse, he actually starts talking about the knowledge. So I'll focus on one particular verse. We won't go over all the verses here. So the 6th verse is a key verse over here. Yatha akasha sthito nityam vayu sarvatra gomahan tatha sarvani bhutani matsthani tyopadharaya. So before I explain this verse, the point which we are discussing is the problem of evil is Arjuna himself now has to fight a terrible war. And when we talk about the problem of evil, generally it is why does evil exist in a good world? But there is a difference between adversity and atrocity. Can anyone think of what is the difference? Adversity and atrocity. Or just thinking of these two words is atrocity for you. Yes, Prabhu. Excellent. So adversity, we could say, is more or less natural. Atrocity is more intentional. So, for example, say if we are in our house and there's a storm that comes and our house gets destroyed. It's terrible, but it's just adversity. But if there is some malicious person who comes and rams a giant truck into our house and tries to destroy our house, that is not an adversity. That is an atrocity. So, aho kashtam, aho anyayam, yad yuyam dharmanandana. When Bhishma Pitamaha is pacifying Yudhishthira Maharaj, he talks about these two categories. Aho kashta. So, kashta is what? In terms of these two things? Adversity. Anyaya is atrocity. So, among these two, which is more difficult to bear? Atrocity, yes. Adversity, what? Okay, I just have to tolerate it. But atrocity is where, how could this person act like this? Why is this person so terrible? How can the person be so vicious? And especially if it's a person close to us, then it becomes even more difficult. Now, still, we could say, while atrocity and adversity and atrocity are both difficult to bear, but actually, for a responsible person, perplexity is even more difficult to bear. I'll explain why. Because in atrocity and in adversity and atrocity, basically we just have to accept, yeah, this is, now it has happened, and now how do I live with it? What do I do? But perplexity comes generally when is bad choice 1 and bad choice 2. So if, so for a good person, bad thing happening to them is worse. Bad thing being done by somebody is even worse. So the bad thing happening is bad. Bad thing being done by someone is worse. But they being put in a situation where they have to do a bad thing, that is the most painful, especially for a responsible person. So suppose there is a famine, there is a star. With this kind of imagination, thought experiments are entertaining, but actually they're agonizing if you go through them. So if there is total, if there is a great famine and there is no food, and a parent has 2 children, and they have food only for 1 child, now which child do you feed? How do you make a decision like that? It's extremely difficult. 2 bad choices. It's very, very difficult. So Arjuna is facing such a perplexity at the start of the Gita, that if I fight, I'll be killing my relatives. It's a terrible thing to do. But if I don't fight, then also my family will be destroyed. And not only that, after that, my kingdom will be overrun by vicious people. Then there'll be destruction in society. So it's 2 terrible choices. And then at that time, especially for people who are responsible, Why am I put in a situation where I have to choose like this? That is a very painful situation to be in. So Arjuna in such a situation, that's why he's asking what is the right thing to do. Because for him, both choices were bad. Killing his relatives, it's not easy, and especially if the relatives involve people like Bhishma and Drona, who are his grandsire and his teacher. And not fighting is also not easy. It's the argument that Krishna gives. Arjuna knows those arguments. He'll be disgraced in society. You say, okay, why worry about dishonor? But it's not only being disgraced in society, it is also that he will be letting vicious people run over society. So it's like it's a very painful situation. So in such situations, the question comes up: why? This problem of evil. Why is a bad thing happening to me? Why is a bad thing being done to me? And why am I in a situation where I have to do a bad thing? I just have no option. So these are increasingly acute problems. Now Krishna answers this question, addresses this question through this one key verse, Yatha Akasha Sthito Nityam. So we could envision the sky to be like an upside down bowl. And then here we have the earth. So this is the sky, this is the earth. And now in between these, we have, say here we may have the wind. Now the wind can move left, the wind can move right, the wind can move downward, laterally, vertically, the wind can move upward. The wind is free to move in various directions. So the wind in that sense is free. At the same time, the area of the movement of the wind is limited by the sky. Here we are using the term sky in a conventional sense, not in a literal sense. Conventional sense is, now literally there is no such thing as a sky, space extends infinitely. But in a conventional sense, if you consider the sky to be like the lid above the earth. So in that sense, Krishna is saying that similarly for all of us, this sky is like Krishna's controllership. Now within Krishna's controllership, here there is a jiva. And then here in various directions, if this is the soul, moving in various directions is the soul's free will. So every soul has free will. And God does not reduce God never takes away the free will of the soul. God takes away, or God determines the area over which the free will is exercised. The two are different things. So in one sense you can say that God, we have unlimited freedom within a limited framework. So right now, all of you sitting here, you're hearing this talk. Actually, not unlimited freedom. We have significant freedom within a limited framework, not unlimited. Right now, you can sit here and here, sit here and here. You can hear and hear. So be physically here and mentally you are hear the class. Or you can sit here but not here. Or you can just walk away from here. And so we have choices. Each one of us has choices. But there are limitations. Just because you want, you can't just fly in the sky. It's not that the next moment you can arrive in India. There are limitations for us. So we all have free will, but the free will is within limitations. Now, one point to understand here is that this sky, normally the sky which covers us all is the same. All of us have this huge sky above us. But this particular area over which our free will extends is sometimes called as kshetra. Kshetra. So now different people have different kshetras. So somebody may have a particular level of kshetra. Somebody may have a giant level of kshetra. So for example, if one of us gets angry, we might just yell at somebody. If a criminal gets angry, that person may just take a gun and shoot somebody. If the president of America gets angry, they may just nuke a country. so, so that freedom to get angry is there for everyone. But the reach of that anger varies from person to person. So Krishna is telling that Yatha Akasha Sthito Nityam Vayu Sarvatra Go Mahan. The Vayu is powerful, it's Mahan. Vayu is wind, it's powerful. But no matter how powerful it goes everywhere, but still it is Akasha Sthito Nityam. It is always situated within the sky. Similarly, the Tha Sarvani Bhutani, similarly all living beings, Mat Sthanitya Upadharaya. They are situated within me, within my will. And if we look at this verse, then the previous two verses that Krishna has spoken start making more sense. In English there are two words. One word is contradiction, and the other word is paradox. Okay, does anyone know the difference between these two words? Contradiction and paradox? Yes, please. Yeah, sure. Ridiculous conclusion. Well, yeah, I think it's like 99% of your answer was right. The last part was ridiculous. so, so the point is that it's not ridiculous. It is contradiction is like actual opposition. Paradox is apparent opposition that is resolvable by a deeper understanding. So one example of paradox is that, okay, or it is a contradiction which can be resolved. So suppose we hear that, this is the example given in Vedic hermeneutics, is Devadatta fasts throughout the day. That's one statement. The second statement is Devadatta's weight is increasing. And I say, how is that possible? So the resolution is Devadatta eats secretly at night. So if we have two opposing statements that are just irreconcilable, then that is a contradiction. But if there is a way to resolve them, then that is a paradox. So there's apparent contradiction. We need to go deeper to resolve it. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in 9.4 and 9.5, Krishna seems to say two opposite things. Krishna says, Maya tatamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham teshu avastitaha. Matsthani sarva bhutani. What it means is all living beings are situated in me. Mat sthani. And then the next verse, right, he begins with Nacha mat sthani bhutani. He says no, and it's not only no. Cha is emphatic. They are certainly not situated in me. What is going on? It's like some people, they speak contradictory statements because they themselves don't understand what they're saying. There's I think a Jewish saying. It says, have your ears heard what your mouth has spoken? So if somebody speaks blatantly contradictory things, he says, are your ears hearing what your mouth is speaking? So, but here when Krishna is speaking, he says, he's emphatic. Matsthani sarvabhutani, naucha matsthani. Next verse. And then if somebody realizes, oh, I spoke something contradictory, then they may apologize. No, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. But actually, Krishna speaks this contradiction in a celebratory tone. Nachamat bhutani pashyame yogamaishwaram. Behold, this is my mystical opulence. Sometimes if we speak something contradictory, then we just hope that the audience didn't hear it and we just rush forward to the next point. But Arjuna says, Pashyame, understand this, behold this. This is my extraordinary opulence. So what is he saying when all living beings are situated in me and all living beings are not situated in me? So that is what is reconciled in 9.6. Where he says, all living beings are situated in V means that nobody can do anything outside of my control. But all living beings are not situated in me. That means that what different people do is not done by me. Let me explain these 2 points again. Matsthani, what it means is that no one's action is independent of me. Is it visible or it's too small? Okay. Does it make a difference here if I, no. Okay, no one's action is independent of me. Let me write it over here. But here, what he says is that Nachamatstani bhutani. I am not responsible for people's actions. So no one can do anything outside my control. But still, people's actions are not controlled by me. That's not contradictory if we consider that within that jurisdiction, like within the movement of the wind is not controlled, but the area of the movement is controlled. So we could put it this way now to understand this. So there is divine will on one side, and then there is human action on the other side. So now we could say that human action, this is the action which is desired by God at one side. This is what God wants us to do. And the other could be simply permitted by God. So not everything that every human being does is desired by Krishna. So you could say, as the Gita will move forward, in this chapter it will explain that this kind of action is the best action. And this is permitted, it is allowed by Krishna, but that is not intended by Krishna. So when Duryodhan is dishonoring Draupadi, that is not Krishna's desire at all. But Duryodhan, by his past karma, has a certain kshetra, has a certain sphere of influence. And within that sphere of influence, if he wants to act atrociously, he can act. Now, when we talk about the limitation of the kshetra, it could be in terms of time. He could act atrociously, but only for a short while he was in power. His power is going to end sooner or later. And even within that, there are some things which he could not do. So, but Duryodhan's actions, so human actions and divine actions or divine will. So, the actions that are permitted by God are not necessarily desired by God. And that is why God is not to be held responsible when bad people do bad things. That, or when even good people do bad things sometimes. God is not responsible for those actions. The idea is that Krishna provides the overall arena within which humans can choose to act. Say, suppose there's a boxing match. Now, boxing is a violent sport to some extent. Now, the boxing organizers, they provide the ring, they regulate the paraphernalia, what kind of boxing gloves you can use, what you can't use. Now, while they are fighting, two boxers are fighting, there are certain rules within which they have to fight. So the idea of the boxing match is that both players play fairly, and based on skill or strength, the better player wins. But if within the boxing arena, suddenly one of the boxers starts doing something which is against the rules of boxing. When Mike Tyson was about to lose a match, he got so angry, he attacked his opponent player and bit off his ear. So it will change from a boxing match to a biting match. So now that is not that is something which is not the way the boxing match is to happen. So Krishna provides us a framework in which we act. But what we do within that framework is up to us. It is not God doing it. So we can have some questions, but before we move forward is that one key differentiation from this perspective. Krishna is the supreme controller. However, he is not the sole controller. He is Parameshwara, but there are various Ishwaras. Every living being also is in one sense called a Ishwara. And what living beings do is not necessarily controlled by God. The area over which they act is controlled by God. But within that area, what they do is not controlled by God. So the point is that when we human beings start blaming God for the bad things that we face, then there is an improper philosophical understanding over there. I'll explain why the understanding is improper briefly, but you had a question? Correct. Yes. So will means many different things. Will does not have necessarily mean intention. Will can also mean permission. So, upadrashta anumanta cha. Anumanta. So anumanta is permission. Anumanta is I allow you to do it. Yes, that is true, but that is not desired by God. That's a different. Correct. Correct. No, so what is the question? Yes, agreed. So I'm only pointing out the difference between what is the Lord's desire and what is the Lord's allowing. What is the Lord wanting us to do and what the Lord is allowing us to do. So there is a clear difference. As a parent, you may allow your child to do certain things, but that does not mean you want the child to do those things, isn't it? Okay, I'll come to that. No, so the words ichha or will, we have to understand them a little carefully. That situation has come in our life that could not have come if God did not allow it to happen. So nothing is out of God's jurisdiction. See, nothing is out of God's control. But no, he's the supreme controller. That means nothing is out of God's control. But that does not mean everything is micro controlled by God. That's the difference. I'll explain this. Let me give an example to illustrate this point further. So Krishna is the cause of all causes. He is not the cause of all effects. What do I mean? What is the difference between the two? That without rains, no vegetation will grow on the earth. So if the rains were not there, the earth would be barren. At the same time, which particular vegetation grows where? The rain is not responsible for that. That depends on what is sowed over there, what seeds are there. So the rains are the cause of all causes, because the seeds are the cause of the particular vegetation, and the rain is the cause of the seeds getting fructified. So cause of all causes means nothing happens without the rains. No vegetation grows without the rains. But the rains are not the cause of all effects. What vegetation is growing is not determined by the rains. Similarly, without God's sanction, nothing can happen in anyone's life. Nothing is outside Krishna's jurisdiction. But just because something is within Krishna's jurisdiction does not mean it is Krishna's intention. It is not that it is not that just to let's come out of the domain of philosophy and let's look at terms of, in historical terms or in terms of practical incidents. So is it when Draupadi is being dishonored, Krishna appears and offers her unlimited cloth? So is it that it is Krishna in the form of Dushasan is disrobing her, and Krishna in his form, invisible form, is offering her robes? There's a difference. The drama may be enacted by Krishna, but human free will is always there. No, nowhere does it say this. Nowhere does it say if he influences the free will, then okay, there are two different things over. There are two different things over here. There are two different things over here. First is that there is a particular, the idea that God will influence human free will, it makes God evil. If that means God makes bad people do bad things and then he gives them the karmic consequences for doing bad things. You know, what kind of, this is not God, this is a devil. It's like it's no. Try to understand. No. Try to. Is this the idea of God? It's like somebody catches my hand and uses my hand to slap you, and then that same person comes and puts me in jail for slapping you. So that person would definitely not be a worshipable person. So now, so our free will is not controlled by Krishna. Na datte kasyachit papam na chaiva sukrutam vipo ajnane navrutam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. In the 5th chapter, 13, 14, 15 verses, Krishna talks about what is called as etiology. Now this word etiology became somewhat widespread during the pandemic. Etiology has a philosophical meaning and it has a pharmacological meaning. So, so the commonality, it is the study of causation. That how do causes lead to effects? So philosophically, which cause leads to which effect, or how the chain of cause effect goes through. Pharmacologically or epidemiologically, what it means is how does disease spread? So etiology. Etiology is a branch within philosophy. The point is not to introduce too many terms, but the point is that this issue is addressed by Krishna, and Krishna clearly says that I am not responsible for people's actions. I do not accept. Na datte kasyachit papam na chaiva sukrutam vibho. He says, I do not accept I am not responsible for people's bad actions. I am not responsible even for people's good actions. Ajnane navrutam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. The living being, the embodied conditioned living being, ajnane navrutam jnanam. They are acting in that way because ajnana. Now here when he's using I don't accept the responsibility of good actions also, what he means is, he's talking about papa and punya. Bhakti exists outside the dialectic. So we'll come back to this again if you have further questions later. The Let me just make a couple of points before we get back to this. That Krishna is understanding that what is happening to us when some adversity is befalling us, it is within Krishna's plan. Tasyanu vihito rajan. That Prabhupada translated that is everything is within Krishna's plan. Krishna doesn't say that everything, Prabhupada doesn't say everything is Krishna's plan. There's a difference between everything is within Krishna's plan, whereas everything is Krishna's plan. Let me explain with the difference with this. So suppose there's a school, and now the school, basically a school is like a staircase. One goes from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3 to grade 4. The purpose of the school is to have all students who are promoted. But suppose a student fails. Now there is a plan for the student who has failed also. For the student who fails, the school doesn't immediately reject the student. Okay, you failed in one subject, you can do this subject next year. Go ahead next year. If you have failed too many subjects, okay, you do redo this year again. There is a plan for students who fail. But the purpose of the school is not to get students to fail, isn't it? So everything is within the school's plan would mean that the students, that there is a plan for students who pass, there is a plan for students who fail. But the school doesn't want students to fail. So here we could differentiate between plan and, put it this way, plan and purpose. So plan is the purpose of student. Purpose is that students should get promoted to the next class. The plan is if you don't get promoted. So you can take another example about, say, if you use GPS. Say if you are coming for this program and GPS says turn right, and say we turn left. Does the GPS say you didn't obey me, get lost? No. So GPS has the territory mapped out. And okay, even if you go take a wrong turn, still you can reroute and come back. So whichever turns we take, they are within the ambit of the GPS. But the GPS didn't want us to take that wrong turn. If we had a particular destination to go to, the GPS wants us to go to that destination. So in that way, basically the point is that Krishna does not control our free will completely. He creates boundaries for our free will. And those boundaries depend on our past karma. But what we do within those boundaries is determined by us. Now, having said this, there are two different ways of looking at this. That like I was in one place where I was in America, and I was staying for some time at one place. There was one, I'm doing some college program. So one American boy started coming for the programs. He started talking. So then he said that he grew up in a school. So he said he wasn't. It was a good university, not Ivy League, but one league below that. So he said that I don't believe in God. Okay. I asked him, so which God do you not believe in? I said, all of them. Now I said, okay, but what is your conception of the God that you don't believe in? He said, I don't believe in a God who sends those who don't believe in him to hell. So I said, even I don't believe in such a God. See, in the Gita, hell is not for non-believers. Hell is for wrongdoers. You can believe whatever you want. You want to be atheist, you can be atheist. Just by being atheistic, you are not going to go to hell. Sometimes an atheist person can be in Sattva Guna. What do I mean by that? Yeah, atheists can also be good people. They may not be good people because of their atheism. They are good in spite of their atheism. That means because of their upbringing, because of their past life karma. Suppose somebody is a very environmentally conscious person, somebody is a charitable person. They may be thinking that this earth is the only earth that we have, so we have to take care of the earth. There are some people who are charitable simply out of practical considerations. If the gap between the wealthy and the poor becomes too stark, too glaring, then the poor will rebel, and then whole society can get disrupted. So there are wealthy people who give charity not just out of compassion or concern for others, out of pragmatic concern or considerations also. We need to keep people peaceful. So they are being charitable, not out of the noblest of motives. So if a person is atheistic, that does not mean that person will go to hell. It is the person does destructive activities. Is activity destructive to oneself, destructive to others. That's when the person will go to hell. Trividham narkasyedam dwaram nashinam atmana. Krishna says the gates to hell are kama, krodha and lobha. It is not, Krishna doesn't say that non-believe, you don't believe in me, that's why you'll go to hell. So there's a difference. So these two are not, so first of all, that is not our understanding of God. Atheism, of course, has its consequences. But Krishna does not condemn us for our beliefs. Punishment comes for our actions, not for our beliefs. Of course, beliefs will translate into actions, that is true. But the point is that beliefs are not, if we were punished for our beliefs, then there's no point in saying we have free will. Isn't it? So anyway, so he said that, then we started talking, he said, what happened in your life? Generally, when you talk about atheism, many people claim to be atheists because of philosophical reasons. That means there's no logical evidence for the existence of God, this, that. But actually, very few people are atheists because of philosophical reasons. Most are because of psychological reasons. So, what do I mean by this? That people have had negative experiences with religion. That I was in Texas and I was going for a program, and there was a car in front of me. The car had a bumper sticker. Oh God, please save me from your preachers. So, if the preachers are holier than thou, hell and brimstone, invoking kind of figures, they just look down on everyone. I just don't want to have anything to do with such people. So it's because of one's negative experience. It could be negative experiences with religious people, generally speaking, or negative experience with some religious rituals or whatever. It's not the irrationality of the rituals that alienates people, that can alienate people, but it is the judgmentality that is associated with it. So he said that he grew up in a family where it was very religious family, Christian family, but it was a particular sect of Christianity which said that any showing of affection to anyone else is a cause of bondage. So the parents would show no affection to their children. This is what kind of idea is that? Yeah, the affection should be towards Jesus, not towards anyone else. No, the affection towards Jesus or God, we want to talk about, will come through those who are representing God in this world. But anyway, so he grew up in a very unloving family, and he said that he had negative experiences, and he had some bad experience in the church also. But then when he was 5, both his parents died in an accident, and he became an orphan. So he said that was the time I just became an atheist. Till then I was resentful, but after that, after unloving parents and then this accident, then I asked him that, okay, now you are in a very good, he said, after that I went to orphanage. Then how are you it was a very good university. How did you get here? He said, when I was around 12, I was going from foster home to foster home. But finally, when I was 12, I was adopted by a family. And a very good family. They're not religious people, but they're a very good family. And they encouraged me, and that's how now I've gotten this university. So then I asked him that at the age of 12, how many kids get adopted? What was the probability of you getting adopted at the age of 12? It's actually extremely low. Most parents want to adopt children, if they at all want to adopt children, they are very small. So they can have the joy of taking care of the child. They can form the basic character of the child. So once a person comes to teenage, it's almost unheard of for such a person to get adopted. So he says, I was very lucky in that connection. So I said, see, when your parents died, it was basically like a drunkard, a person under alcohol driving, person under alcoholic influence driving and killing him. He says, when your parents died, you are attributing that not to the drunk driver, you are attributing that to God. But when you got adopted, you are attributing it to luck, not to God. So if you are going to attribute the events in life to God, then be consistent. Attribute both good and bad to God. Don't just attribute the bad to God and the good to chance. That is, you're saying God is unfair, but you are being unfair to God. So he told me, hey, I never thought of it like that. So he said, let me think about it. So then after that, the preacher over there told me that now he is coming more regularly to programs. So the point I was making is that every event that happens, say if this is an event, every event we can place it within various frameworks to understand their cause. I think I may have we might discuss this in my previous visit also. Suppose the event is I am feeling cold. Now, if I am feeling cold, it could be because maybe I am sitting near the air condition. It could be because I am not adapted to this particular weather. It could be because I am having fever. It could be because maybe I'm not wearing warm enough clothes. And when I'm trying to deal with that, it is not necessary to escalate everything to a particular level. I'm feeling cold because God wants me to feel cold. Really? Okay. But what? I'm feeling cold. Let's look at some circumstantial reasons for that. Yes, I wouldn't be feeling cold if the circumstances had not been sanctioned by God. But that is not God's intention. There's a particular circumstance, you address it at that particular level. So every situation, we need to know which causal framework to put it in. Let's put it another way. Suppose some guest comes to our house. Now, and the guest tells us, I'm feeling cold. Will we tell them, Prabhu, what to do? The world is dukkhalaya. The world is a place of distress. Well, it is true that there are two truths. I am feeling cold, the world is a place of distress. But the true truths come together to create an illusion. The connection is not appropriate over there. If somebody is coming to us and telling us I'm feeling cold, then if they are guests in our home, we provide them some, should I get a heater for you? Should I get some blanket for you? What can I do for you? So we try to address that issue. So every action, that every situation, event that we experience in our life, we don't have to attribute it to God. You should tell them that, oh, Prabhu, you are feeling cold, that is God's will, please accept it. No. Yes, it is true that that person would not feel cold if without God's sanction. But we have to focus on what is my thing to do in this situation. So, when Krishna says later on, Nachamam tani karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. Udasina vadasinam asaktam teshu karmasu. When, say, Duryodhan is trying to dishonor Draupadi, when Duryodhan tried to burn the Pandavas, including Kunti, when in the war, so many people would be killed. Krishna is not responsible for this. Krishna is not entangled by this. Nibadnanti dhananjaya. No. Nibadnanti is to be bound. Krishna says, I am not bound by this. I am situated as if detached. Udasina vadasinam. I am situated like an observer, a detached observer. Krishna is not completely detached. There are limits. As I said, everybody has a kshetra, and within that kshetra, people can act. But once that kshetra is exceeded, immediately there will be boundaries. There will be limitations. So, Krishna is telling Arjuna in the context of the Gita. So, if you go to next verse, last verse in this section, you are discussing 1 to 10 is Maya Dhakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam. So, he's giving a chain of causation over here. That Maya Adhyakshena, under my supervision. When I am overseeing, things happen within my supervision. But the hetu anena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. The immediate cause is the material cause. So the war is happening because Duryodhana is obstinate. Because Duryodhan is vicious. Now, did Krishna want that war to happen? Well, Krishna wanted to establish dharma in the world. And for establishing dharma, the adharmic people need to be controlled. Now, if the adharmic people would be voluntarily ready to give up their adharma, then Krishna does not have to cause a war to kill them. So when Krishna went as the Shanti Doot, as the peace messenger, he was earnestly trying for peace. It was not just a superficial action for optics. Not that Krishna internally wanted the war to happen and externally just speaking, let's avoid the war. No. Krishna earnestly tried to prevent the war. But Duryodhan's obstinacy was there. So Krishna's purpose is to establish dharma. But that does not mean that that purpose has to happen by a particular path only. There are people who are adharmic, and adharmic people need to be stopped. So when Krishna says, my will happen, that means the adharmic people will be stopped. On the Kurukshetra war, the adharmic people, how they will be stopped? If Arjuna fights, he can be an instrument. If Arjuna does not fight, then Krishna will do that by some other means. But even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is telling Arjuna that it is your free will to act. Either you can choose to be my instrument or you can choose not to be my instrument. Of course, Arjuna is a Kshatriya. And if he decides not to fight now, then what is going to happen is, if in future he sees some injustice, some aggression, the Kshatriya within him will come out. And that time he will want to fight. But if at that time he has taken sannyas, he has renounced Kshatriya dharma, then for him to fight will be inappropriate. It will be karmically entangling. If somebody is a police person and there are some riots, the police person has to stop the riots. But if an ordinary person, if suppose person gets frustrated with the police job and resigns, and then that person becomes a vigilante, just going around and shooting all criminals. Now vigilantes are nice in movies, but in the real life, if we start having vigilante justice, whole society will become chaotic. If everybody starts taking the law in their own hands, society will not function. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that your swabhav is a limitation. You have the Kshatriya nature, you will act as a Kshatriya. Now right now you can choose whether you want to fight or not. But eventually you will take up arms. But at that time it will not be in the pursuit of dharma. Now it will be in the pursuit of dharma. So therefore, from this part, the next part that will start will be where Krishna talks about how different people either surrender to him or defy him, how people approach him differently. That will be the next session which I'll talk. But the key point over here in what we discussed is that when bad things happen to us, and not just bad things happen to us, bad things are done to us. And that time we also ourselves don't have any good choice. We also have to respond. The bad thing doesn't necessarily mean a dharmic thing. Arjuna's fighting was not adharmic. It was dharma. But still it was not a pleasant dharma. It was painful as dharma. So when we have to do something bad, at that time, how do we process the situation? So the idea is when bad things are done to us by someone, we we don't blame God for that bad thing. You know, why is Krishna doing this to me? Well, it's not necessarily Krishna doing it to us. It's Krishna is allowing it. We can say, why is Krishna allowing it? That's a fair question. But there's a difference between Krishna allowing something and Krishna doing something to us. It is not that Krishna came as Ravana and abducted. Sorry, Krishna came as Ravana and abducted Sita. No, that was Ravana doing that thing. Krishna, Lord Ram allowed it. But so it's one thing that when we look at adversity in our life, what is the God's role in adversity? One is, some people may think that he's the cause of the adversity. Let's put it this way: he is the source of the adversity. That's one way of looking at it. The other is, he is the shelter amid the adversity. And third is that he is the solution to the adversity. That now, if you consider in the first canto, there are two incidents where one is the bull and the cow being beaten by Kali impersonating as a Kshatriya. So at that time, Parikshit Maharaj asks the bull, what is the cause of your suffering? And the bull replies, different philosophers have talked about different causes of suffering, and there's nothing conclusive. Therefore, I can't say. So here, he is exhibiting humility, that the cause of suffering is unknowable for us. That on the other hand, Parikshit Maharaj, when the snake bird when he gets the curse to die in 7 days, he says that it is Lord Vishnu. It is the Lord has arranged for me for this situation because I was too attached, and he has helped me to become detached. So Prabhupada says in some situations, the devotee says that Krishna has come as the suffering to make me detached. Now that is the vision, that is, if that is anukul to bhakti, we accept it. That Krishna is the source of the suffering. But if that is not anukul to our bhakti, we don't have to accept it. We can say that the source of suffering is inexplicable. What is important is we see Krishna as the shelter amid suffering. Even sometimes solution will take its own time. Solution also may not happen immediately. We pray to Krishna for solving a problem, or when will this go away? But it may not happen immediately. So at that time, what we focus on is we seek the shelter of Krishna. Shelter means we absorb ourselves in remembrance of Krishna. We understand that Krishna has some plan for my life, and whatever is happening to me is within Krishna's plan. So now, how can I serve Krishna in this situation? And sometimes it may be that the cause of our suffering is directly coming from Krishna. Prabhupada says that happens. A pure devotee suffering is created by Krishna. Now that does not mean Krishna is an evil god who does that kind of thing. He makes people suffer even if they don't deserve to suffer. But the point is, Krishna is teaching something over there. Like Prabhupada gives a domestic example that sometimes if a woman is just married into a house and then she is not serving properly, then the mother-in-law may chastise her own daughter. Hey, you don't serve like this, do like this, do like that. Now actually, she is meaning to instruct her daughter-in-law. But the daughter-in-law is new and the daughter has not made any mistake. The daughter-in-law has made the mistake. But the daughter may be chastised. The daughter and the mother both understand that actually the daughter doesn't become resentful. Why are you criticizing me when I'm not done anything? The daughter understands that this is meant for the daughter-in-law to learn. So the lesson to be learned is that even when great devotees suffer, they don't blame Krishna for that suffering. Even when they are blameless. Often these great devotees are blameless and common people are shameless. What shameless means is, I'm not using in a judgmental sense. I'm saying that often we make mistakes, we know we have made the mistake, and still we ask, why is this happening to me? Even when we are due for the consequences of the mistake, still we resent it. But even when a pure devotee has done nothing wrong, still they may suffer. So the point is, from them, their example, Krishna is teaching us that don't blame him for suffering. Our purpose is that we want to have a favorable disposition toward Krishna. And favorable disposition toward Krishna, for some people, the idea that the suffering is coming from Krishna may be favorable. But for many people, it is very difficult. When suffering is coming, that Krishna is doing this to me. No, it means if that is very unfavorable, then there's no need to talk about it that way. When I'll conclude with this point that when the devotees in London had done Rath Yatra, first time, so that those devotees who had gone to London were very ambitious and they wanted to do everything big. So devotees in San Francisco had started Rath Yatra in 1968 and they wanted to do it a year later in London. So they made a giant cart. But they made the cart huge. They didn't make the wheels proportionately big. And then the Ratha was going along and it went for a short distance, the Rath just collapsed. The wheels collapsed. It was a PR disaster. The devotees were devastated. And then Gurudas Prabhu, in a very dispirited mood, he wrote to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, did the Rath collapse because of our poor devotion? And Prabhupada replied, it collapsed because of your poor engineering. So, the point is that we don't have to, for every single situation, bring Krishna into the picture. Krishna consciousness means we think of Krishna in a way that is favorable for us to serve him. And if a particular vision is favorable, that is fine. But if it is not favorable, then there's no need. The causality, the etiology is complex. And humility means we can't really know why exactly something is happening. So rather than focusing on what is the cause of the suffering, if we can't figure it out, focus on how can I deal with the suffering. What is the shelter that will strengthen me within suffering? What is the solution for the suffering? So we want to make sure that for the actions that happen in our life, we don't start blaming God for them. That does not mean that we are simply trying to get God off the hook. That is not the point. The point is that causal chain is very complex. And in this world, when things happen, may be happening through multiple agents. And which agent, at which level something is to be addressed, that requires intelligence. So Arjuna is instructed through the Gita that when you are fighting the war, is this war Krishna's will? Well, right now it is Krishna's will. Does that mean Duryodhana's evil actions were Krishna's will? No, those were his will. And now this war is there, it's a bad choice, but make the best of bad bargain. This war is not outside of Krishna's plan. Was this war Krishna's plan? Well, it depends. If there are demoniac people who are insistent on being demoniac, then they have to be neutralized, they have to be killed. But if demoniac people choose to stop being demoniac, then they don't have to be killed. So Krishna has one purpose, but his plan is resourceful. His plan can be multifaceted. His plan can work in many different ways. A student who is not studying will have to maybe repeat the same year. But does the student have to repeat the same year? The student starts studying, then the student doesn't. The school has the facility for students to repeat the years, but the school doesn't want the students to repeat the year, and the student reforms, they don't have to repeat the year. So we understand the last point is that we can't always be grateful for all situations, but we can be grateful in all situations. So grateful is cultivate gratitude. So this for all situations, it is sometimes very difficult. Some situations may seem so painful that how can I be grateful for the situation? But even if it's for is not possible, in all situations. Why is this particular thing happening to me? I don't know. And I just don't see any good in this particular situation happening to me. But although the situation is happening to me, there are still good things in my life. Suppose somebody is young and they get some deadly cancer. It's a terrible situation. It will be very difficult for that person to be grateful for the cancer. But they can be grateful that overall I have good health. I have a supportive community around me. I have family support. I have my spirituality. Now medical science is advancing. There are so many things which I can do to deal with it. I can be grateful for that. Parikshit Maharaj, he expresses his gratitude. It is gratitude not for that fact that Shringi has cursed him. He sees that in Krishna's plan, but he expresses gratitude to the sages that they have come to help him in his final journey. So as devotees, a particular event, we may not be able to see it as, is this what Krishna wanted to happen? Or is Krishna allowed to happen? We can't know that. But what we can know is, whatever situation we are in, Krishna will give us the resources to face that situation. If we look for the resources, if we pray to Krishna, we will give the strength to face the situation. Mat chittaha sarva durgani mat prasada tarishyasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all obstacles by my grace. Krishna is not saying just if you become conscious of me, there will be no obstacles. Krishna is neither saying that if you become conscious of me, you will see all obstacles as coming from me. No, he's saying if you become conscious of me, you will be able to pass over all obstacles by my grace. That means in this particular analysis, you will find shelter in me. The obstacle will be there, but you will be able to go beyond those obstacles. You will find shelter, you will find solution. So Krishna doesn't say that Krishna consciousness means to see Krishna as the source of all problems. It means Krishna consciousness is to see that in Krishna there is a solution to every problem. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. We broadly discussed. The first point I discussed is about the three levels of pain. That is adversity, when bad things happen to us. Then there is atrocity, where bad things are done by someone to us. And even worse can be perplexity, where somebody is where we have no good choice in response to that situation. So how do we maintain our faith in all of these? Where is God in these situations? So to understand that, we discussed basically, the second point was multiple levels of causality. Etiology was the section. So the example of the wind moving in a particular direction is not determined by the sky, but the area is determined. So Krishna says, Matsthani sarva bhutani, that means nothing happens without my sanction. But nacha matsthani bhutani, that means not everything that happens is my intention. So we could say, so for us, this understanding, the point of this understanding is that we can always have faith that Krishna, everything that is happening is within Krishna's plan. So third point I discussed the difference between plan and purpose. that not everything that happens is Krishna's purpose. If Krishna wanted, if Krishna does, or Krishna wants evil people to do evil things, then it's like the teacher, that the school wants students to fail, and the school gets the student to fail, and the school punishes the failed students. That's not the way Krishna works. So, but Krishna has an arrangement even for those who turn away from him, those who misuse their free will. So, those who misuse their free will, there is arrangement for Krishna, and those who are affected by the misuse of free will, there is also arrangement for Krishna for them. And the last part we discuss is Krishna. We focus on being Krishna conscious. That in this situation, where do I see Krishna? So, as a source, maybe, it depends. As a shelter, certainly. As a solution, yes, but that will be eventually. We may have to be patient. We can always find shelter of Krishna. That's why we can be grateful in all situations by finding some way to take shelter of Krishna in those situations. But that does not necessarily mean that we see Krishna as a source of that situation. So as a source, if it is favorable, we can see. But the primary thing is we see Krishna as a shelter in all situations and ultimately as a solution. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So for this applause, Shri Krishna as the source, shelter, or solution. All three. I'll have to think about that. Yeah. So, any questions or comments? Yes, bro.
It has to go till Fremont and Dublin. I can't go to Dublin. Hare Krishna, voice in Dublin.
Yes, good, yeah.
Thank you. So, Prabhu, you gave an order for the last row, source, shelter, and solution, right? And you said ultimately you get to the solution. I am not able
Ultimately, shelter, I would say. Not necessarily. Eventually, the solution will come. Sometimes, no solution may also come. Sometimes we may have to live with some problems. But even amid those problems, we can find the shelter of Krishna. Like say, for example, when the great kings were trying to get Ganga down to the earth, they're performing tapasya. There are many generations of several kings, they spent their whole life, but they were not able to get Ganga down. But in that tapasya, they got the shelter of Krishna. So solutions may not always come at the material level.
I think Prabhu, you answered it, because I was going to say the same thing, that it doesn't look like solution is always the last. It looks like the
Shelter is the ultimate.
Yes. So,
Shelter is the ultimate, because in one sense, whatever problems we solve at the material level, sakale ne hamahata, by the power of time, again some problem or the other will come up. So there are no perfect solutions in the material world, but we can have solutions that help us to better raise our consciousness. So yes, if solutions can be found, good. If they can't be found, we still take shelter of Krishna.
sure.
Okay,
Thanks. So that clearly answered it. So my other question was, it's okay. You talked about that scenario where there's this parent who are devoted more to Jesus than to that kid. And it was taken, my understanding was delivered in a negative connotation. So my question is, in Krishna conscious, aren't we supposed to be doing that? To focus more on Krishna and then less on the
No.
kids?
So that's a different thing. What was told was that any expression of affection will be the cause of attachment. And therefore, there should not be any show of affection. That is a very different thing. See, for everyone, their primary relationship has to be with Krishna. For mother, father, the primary relationship with Krishna. But that does not mean that they don't act appropriately in the relationship in the world. So, it is, as a mother, I serve Krishna. As a father, I serve Krishna. But when I'm serving Krishna in the role of a mother or father, I serve by taking care of the child properly. And one aspect of taking care of the child is actually physical expression of affection.
So that's exactly where my question was, Prabhu. So is the expression of affection a necessity as part of the relationship, or is just the duty to perform that action good enough? For example, if you have to take your kid to the school, does it necessarily have to come with, oh, you're getting late, let me pick you up, let me take you, here's the milk, you can drink it on the way, etc., etc. Versus, here's a car, you come in, if you go late, you handle a situation, too bad, you fail, you're here for 15 years, I'm here as a deliverer, I can't do anything. That's also the way. But Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. So that's the other way to do it. And actually, I'm more the second side, so that's what
See, there is individual nature. Different people have different natures. So the question is that, is expressing affection essential to one's doing one's duty? If we are just doing our duty, isn't that enough? See, there is one thing is that each of us has our nature, and some people may be more expressive in their emotions. Some people may be less expressive in their emotions. But in general, a relationship is not just about physical well-being or just spiritual well-being. We all at the present are three-level being. Our existence is three-level: physical, mental, and spiritual. So we need to take care at all three levels: physical, mental, and spiritual. Now, of course, depending on a particular nature of a particular person, how much care a person can offer at a particular level may vary. So some people may not be very expressive in their emotions. That's fine. They can try to change that a little bit. But then if they're aware of that, and then if they make sure that the emotional needs of the child are also taken care of. If the parent is not so expressive, maybe the mother is a little more expressive. So it depends. So we can't change ourselves too much. It may be too unnatural for us. Like some people, when they meet each other, they just want to hug each other. Some people, they just shake hands and then they move away. Okay. So, okay, friends can hug each other, but should they? Well, that depends. Some people, they're uncomfortable with that. So that we express affection in an appropriate way. Okay, thank you. Yes. Where is the mic? Okay. Mahaprabhu.
So you touched upon the problem of evil in the beginning. You also kind of touched about theism. So building upon Govind Prabhu's question there, that any evil that happens in the world, potentially, not potentially, actually, as Krishna conscious devotees, we attribute that as the will of the Lord, or not a desired will, but it's a sanction, because nothing can happen without the will of the Lord. Now, from one of the arguments that comes from the atheistic community is that this is essentially an unfalsifiable argument, because potentially anything that happens in the world can be mapped to the will of the Lord, and that way you can basically explain any misery or any good happening to anybody. So that's one problem that we also face as devotees in general, because we see good things happening to bad people, bad things happening to good people, and eventually our explanation is the same, that it is under the will of the Lord, they have their previous karmas and all of that. But the cycle of unfalsifiability is something that is not broken here. Is there an argument that is conclusively given in Gita, or is there something that you can provide that breaks this chain of unfalsifiability? Because any event can be explained in those terms, and what atheists ultimately say is that this is your way of post-event rationalization. That's what you say, but ultimately everything is by chance.
So I'll try to express my understanding of your question first. Then I'll try to address it. So basically, the idea that everything is God's will, that's an unfalsifiable argument. And then that can be used to explain away anything. Hmm? And then we may use other expressions like karma, but basically we are just adding one unfalsifiable proposition to another unfalsifiable proposition. So how do we deal with that? Well, first thing is that we have to look at how those who are truly devoted people, those who are trying to do God's will, those saints who are devoted to God, how do they live? How do they understand and act in the world? Understand the world and act in the world. So, everything is God's will is not necessarily taken even by the saintly people to just justify or perpetuate the status quo. That means when Mahaprabhu predicted that my name, the holy name of Krishna will be chanted in every town and village, but didn't say, okay, that is Mahaprabhu's will, Mahaprabhu will make it happen. He said, it is my responsibility to make it happen. And Prabhupada tirelessly tried to share Krishna Bhakti all over the world. So, when Prabhupada was doing this, okay, first I'll explain this in ways which we can understand, and I'll try to briefly explain it in a way which would can communicate to outsiders also. But so when Prabhupada was trying to share Krishna Bhakti in India, it was not working. Then we know Prabhupada decided, let me go to the West and make Western people, inspire Western people to become devotees. And they come to India, the Indians will become inspired. Now it's significant over here. Prabhupada didn't think that, okay, if Indian people are not becoming devotees, if people are not becoming devotees, maybe that is Krishna's will. Krishna doesn't want people to become devotees. Maybe Krishna doesn't want his plan to act through me. Prabhupada, in one sense, that people are not becoming devotees, he did not escalate the cause of that to Krishna's will. He analyzed that cause to the particular cultural situation in India, where Indians were enamored by the West. So Prabhu, if you consider, I talk about attributing various levels of causation. So Prabhupada did not take it as Krishna's will and leave it at that. Prabhupada found a material cause for it. And then he acted to address that material cause. His purpose was spiritual. But he acted at a material level. He analyzed a material cause and tried to address that material cause. His intentions were spiritual. So the point I'm making is that even those who are great devotees, those who are purely devoted saints, they don't attribute every situation to God's will. Or rather, let me put it another way, that they don't attribute or they don't consider that every situation, because every situation is God's will, or not a blade of grass moves without God's will, they don't use that to justify the status quo. They try to find something that they can do about it. So atheists often argue that if you just start saying if you just start saying everything is God's will, then there would have been no scientific advancement, because we would not try to find out the material causes of why something happened, which is not true. Newton believed in God, and yet when the apple fell on him, he didn't, when he was, what made this apple fall? He didn't say it was God's will that the apple fell. In fact, his understanding that God is ultimately in charge made him implicitly accept that the falling of this apple was not a chance event. There is some causal mechanism behind it. And in exploring that causal mechanism, he came up with the theory of gravity. In fact, he is said to have said There are many quotes which are attributed to him, but not necessarily we cannot find specific sources for those quotes. One of them is that he says, I think thy thoughts after thee. So he saw his scientific discoveries as spiritual insights into how God had organized the working of the world. So we could say that in one sense, it is belief in God, if that actually enables us to search for various causes. Because Om Purnamadaha Purnam Idam. Purnam Idam means that the world is complete in itself, means we can find an explanation for an event in this world itself. An event in this world, an explanation for this can be found in this world itself. Now that does not necessarily mean that is the complete explanation. That is the correct explanation. So did the apple fall because of God's will? Did the apple fall because of gravity? But it's both. Gravity works under God's will ultimately. Gravity is also God's arrangement. So when we say that if some devotee is in a serious health condition and that devotee survives, say it's Krishna's mercy. It's Krishna's mercy that he survived. Does that mean that we don't give credit to the doctors who treated the devotee? No, we acknowledge the doctor's diligence, doctor's expertise. So the problem comes in two ways. That, see, if this is the event that has happened, one, we find some material explanation. Okay, I need a material explanation of why this marker is not working. Okay. And then there is a, you could say, a devotional explanation, that is a theistic explanation that Krishna is the cause. So the problem comes either way. When we say only this, that is the atheistic way of looking at it. Only this is the cause. And even if we say only this is the cause, that can also be a problem. That there's no need to consider any intermediate factors. This is God's will. No, God's will acts through various causal chains, and it is important for us to understand those causal chains. So that's how we address the issue. So the caricature of religion is that religious people, by saying everything is God's will not consider any other causes. But nobody functions like that. In Srila Prabhupada, he was most dependent on Krishna. But Prabhupada, when he was building temples, he made arrangements for the temples if they had to succeed, sustainably survive. And for example, Prabhupada was building a temple in Vrindavan. Then Prabhupada said, in Vrindavan, we are not going to do much preaching. Vrindavan, we are not going to get donations. So Prabhupada said, when we are building the temple, we build a guest house over there, the MVT. And from the guest house, we will get Lakshmi. In other cities, we can do preaching and people can come. But Prabhupada was very level-headed. Prabhupada didn't say just depend on Krishna, means we don't look at intermediate causes. If we consider when Prabhupada was on Jalduta, at that time he wrote a journal. So one of the entries in the journal is, he says, I thank Lord Krishna for inspiring Sumti Moraji from within her heart to make all these nice arrangements for me. When Prabhupada was going on Jalduta, at that time he had carried some grains and some vegetables with him. But he was not sure whether there would be enough. Sumti Moraji had told Captain Pandya that he's a vegetarian, arrange adequate stock of food for him. So Prabhupada was grateful. So Prabhupada was acknowledging the immediate cause, but also acknowledging the ultimate cause. So my understanding is the falsifiability argument is basically a misdirection. It is not the relevant argument over here. Because just because we say that God is ultimately in control does not mean that we don't look at various other factors that are involved also. We look at those factors and we appropriately address those factors. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Can we come back to you? Oh. Yes. Is this watch working or is it not working? Okay. Is that intentional? Oh God. So you are looking only from a transcendental perspective. I'm looking for a material cause. Yes, Prabhu.
Haribol, can I ask a burning question, bro? Is that
Can I
okay?
ask her?
Burning question.
Okay. Will it burn me?
Yeah, it may not burn you, but it may burn me. So, if I cross my limits, please forgive me. We know that Srimad Bhagavatam is Amala Purana, right? So, Amala means no dirt in it. Certain people have expressed their doubts regarding the 11th canto to me recently.
11th.
11th canto. The reason they think that there are certain sections in Srimad Bhagavatam which are interpolated at a later point of time. For example, the Srimad 11th canto talks about the story of Chanakya Maharaj, Chanakya Pandit. Chanakya Pandit and also Chandragupta Maurya's and Chandragupta Maurya and Chanakya's story. And then how is this possible that, of course, rest of the sections, I have strongly said, I've read Srimad Bhagavatam and, I don't think, I don't think it's interpolated. So, but this specific thing, the story of Chanakya, is a little bit intrigued me, and I said, I don't have an answer. So, how do we refute the argument that even some Westerners, some Westerners who studied Srimad Bhagavatam from their point of view, they have given a date of 7th century AD.
Yeah.
And so I don't personally I don't agree with that 7th century AD date, but
Okay, please wait a minute right now. The 2-3 things over here. This is a big subject. I'll answer the question briefly. I mean, and maybe we can have a separate session or something or later. But first thing is that with respect to scripture, the Bhagavatam itself, so how does the Bhagavatam contain the story of Chanakya when Chanakya, that incident happened later? The first of all, that whole 11th canto, the tense over there is the future tense. Bhagavatam itself is saying this is a prediction for the future. And the sages are telling, I mean, Shukdev Goswami and then Sutta Goswami later, they're explaining certain events that are going to happen in the future. The Bhagavatam is giving the Vamshavali. That is one of the characteristics of the Bhagavatam, of Puranas. So in the Vamshavali, in the Vamsha, what is going to happen in the future is given. So from the Bhagavatam's perspective itself, it's a prophecy. So that's why it is not inconsistent, because that is not the only prophecy made. There are other prophecies also which are made over there. It just comes in that part. Now, as far as the interpolation is concerned, generally we talk about, the way, if I ask this question, I talk about 3 things. First is that there is a oral tradition and there is a written tradition. So when historians try to find out when was the Bhagavatam written, see, when I'm saying the oral tradition was there, that does not mean there were no written copies. But the idea is written copies were extremely rare and few. Writing was not easy before the printing press. And moreover, Indian climate, it's tropical. That written, even if we write on leaves or whatever, it doesn't last for long. So in general, in tropical regions, archaeology and especially textual archaeology is an extremely difficult business. It isn't, that's just widely well known fact. So how do archaeologists or other this particular field is called critical scholarship, textual criticism. How do they find out the dates? They broadly have three methods. They look at the content itself and they say, okay, this particular idea, this must, if from the history of ideas, we know that this idea was prevalent at this particular time. So now, from that perspective, saying that this event happened at a particular time, and then that was added in the Bhagavatam. They look at the content. The second, they look at the cross references. Cross references means which other books have talked about this book. And the third is they talk about archaeology in general, but specifically architecture. That means the themes from this book, where else have they been? There are a few other methods, but broadly, how can you date a text like that? Ancient texts, you date them by three ways. Look at its content, look at who else has talked about it, and look at what other artifacts or are there which can point to this text. So now, from the content when the argument is made, it is not the soundest of arguments, because the Bhagavatam itself is saying it's a prophecy. If you're looking from the Bhagavatam's perspective, it is giving incidents that are happening in the future. So, from the cross-referencing perspective and the architecture perspective, it is a fact that a large number of archaeological remains from India were either destroyed during the 1,000 years of the Muslim rule, or they have never been uncovered. If you consider the Middle East, the budget for archaeological research, Middle East is basically mainly Christians, Jews, Christians, Muslims, their religion originated from that area. The amount of money that they have spent in archaeological research to try to establish the historicity of Jesus, historicity of Moses and things like that, what India has spent is not even 1/1,000,000th of that. 1/1,000,000th, and India is a huge country. If you consider overall Jerusalem, Egypt, and all those key places in biblical history, they're all very close by. So much archaeological research still remains to be done. And even with what has been done, we have found near the coast of Dwarka, we have found the remnants of an ancient city, which so there's a lot of research to be done. So the kind of certainty that is attributed to these dates, that is very questionable. There's one of the key historians, one of the founding historians, Devamrita Maharaj, written a book called Searching for Vedic India. In that, there's one section called When the West Loved India. Initially, when British people came to India, they always had some commercial aspirations. But there's a difference between a commercial aspiration and a colonial aspiration. Commercial means we do trade and we get money. But in the phase before they decided to start ruling India, they thought India was so big, the idea of ruling it was itself not very realistic. So in that period, they were actually exploring Indian history. And there are so many Western people at that time, not just British, but even German and others. They have expressed so much lavish appreciation of the language, of the culture, of the wisdom, and so many things. And during that period, one historian, he says, all attempts to date Indian literature are like throwing darts in the dark. You throw a dart, wherever it falls, you say that is the date it is. Now since then, a dart is basically like throw an arrow or a pin in the dark. So this is not very credible. We're not saying that those scholars are ill-motivated. We're not necessarily even saying the scholars are wrong. We're just saying that the certainty with which they are making the claims is wrong. Because there is not, based on the evidence that they have, that might seem to be a reasonable conclusion, although even that can be debated. Because there are references to themes similar to the Bhagavatam in previous literature also. So Edwin Bryant, Advaita Pranaprabhu, has written a book on the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the introduction to that book, he gives an elaborate analysis of the various theories about the various attempts of dating of the Bhagavatam. And yes, none of the current empirical attempts to date the Bhagavatam will agree with the traditional date of 3000 BC. That is true. But even if they succeed in arriving at particular dates, that only indicates that we can find the physical remains, whether it is textual, referential, or architectural remains. But if there had been a few copies and in the oral tradition the knowledge had been going on, how would we prove that? And how would they disprove that? So in archaeology, there's one principle: absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So absence of evidence, we can say that we can't prove that it is 5,000 years old. But that does not mean that your evidence, that their claim is true. Their claim is also questionable. And in general, the last point I'll make is that in general, the exact date of when a particular thing happened is not very important in our tradition. See, the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they are very history-centered religions. So there would be no Christianity if Jesus had not appeared. But there would have been Bhakti Yoga even if a particular avatar had not appeared. Now, in a particular expression, Bhakti Yoga might not be there. If Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had not appeared, we would not have had Gaudiya Vaishnavism. But Vaishnavism would still have been there. So even if Krishna had not appeared, Krishna still exists in the spiritual world, still the bhakti wisdom would be there, the spiritual wisdom would be there. So for our tradition's perspective, the exact dates of when particular things have happened are not very important. So that's why sometimes when a particular question is raised, rather than answering the question, we need to question the question. That means that, why is this particular date so important? Why is the exact date important for us? So it is not that within the tradition, the Bhagavatam, so many commentators have written commentary on the Bhagavatam. How many of the commentators have focused on the date of the Bhagavatam? They've accepted the traditional date, but they have not written elaborate theses emphasizing that date. That is important, but it is not the most important thing. So if, for example, some devotee who has, or some seeker who has studied archaeology, who has come from the academic path, if they can't accept that the Bhagavatam's date is 5,000 years old, that is not a deal breaker for practicing Krishna Bhakti. If you think that the Bhagavatam came maybe in 700 BC or 700 AD or 300 AD or 250 AD or 250 BC or whatever, well, the point is the principles that are being given are timeless and timely, both. They are eternally relevant and they are especially relevant in today's world. So practicing those principles is what is important. So that's why we don't have to give too much importance to this question. I was doing these monks podcasts, so I had done a podcast with Radhika Raman Prabhu. It's one of the longest podcasts, almost 2.5, 3 hours. So this whole academic approach to study of scripture, if somebody wants to explore that podcast could be quite helpful to understand the various issues involved. Okay? Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay. I know you have questions, but I also have a question now. So let me know how much time we should go on. So, okay, 9 p.m. So, one or two questions more? Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's also an option. If you want to get your plates, you can get your plates and come back. Oh yeah, we'll have to can close the altar. And let's take one or two questions. Maybe, Chaitanya, we can talk and finalize. Tell me when to complete the. No. Okay. Let's take one or two questions. Maybe you can check if we can. Those of you want, we can continue. We can have, but you can start prasadam also. If you can close the altar or something like that. Yes, bro. Please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhuji, it is said that suffering is meant for purification. So many times it looks like it comes in a proportion where you can't take it. And we see in outside world, I mean, you have explained about the shelter aspect of the taking shelter in the adversities. So basically, when the suffering is out of proportion, we see people going for lower things like drugs and alcohol. So that doesn't seems to be serving the purpose why it is there. So how do we understand that, bro?
So suffering is meant for purification, but sometimes the quantity of suffering impels people to actually do more impure things. Yes. There are 2-3 points in this. First is that sometimes a person may be in a particular phase of karma where it's very difficult to make a good choice. Let's take a simple example. If somebody is in coma, now what can they do at that time? They're just passive. So sometimes some people are 6 months, 1 year, several years in coma. So during that time, the soul practically has no free will left. The soul's free will is there, and there are some scientific studies which show that even during that time, if they have people, loved ones around them, and they speak some words of affection and things like that, that has some impact on them. But that is not visible at our level. They don't express it in a way that others can perceive. So during that time, maybe they can only receive they can only receive devotional stimuli. If a devotee is in coma or a devotee's relative is in coma for many, many, many days, then how can they use their free will properly? They can't at that time. But they can receive spiritual stimuli, but they can't make spiritual choices. So sometimes if you consider this to be like an upside down dome or upside down bowl, sometimes that may be extremely small. So during that time, practically nothing can be done. So yes, sometimes good choices may be very difficult, and that's understandable. But whenever the good choices become possible, then one takes that. So that's the first point. So don't be too hard on somebody who makes bad choices, because sometimes good choices are really difficult. But the other point is that's why there has to be individual and social strength. That means none of us know what challenges we are going to face in the future. And that's why right now, if we train ourselves to make good choices, we develop our strength, then it will be easier to make good choices in future. And along with we trying to develop our strength, we try to also develop healthy social connections. And those social connections will support us. So if there is no support system, then it's very easy to just be massacred by the mind, because we are always with our mind, and the mind prompts unhealthy choices, then we just go down. That's why, in one sense, while life has always been difficult, in many ways you can say, at least in recent history, if we consider 200, 300, 500 years before, physically life was much tougher. We have many more comforts and things like that now as compared to the past. And yet now we seem to having more people succumbing to self-destructive habits, addictions, even suicide. So one of the reasons is that the social support systems have gone down a lot. That even this individual sense of social responsibility also has gone down quite a bit. So we need to create multiple support systems. And we may say that why does Krishna give us, last point I'll make is that why does Krishna give us suffering that we can't bear? Well, if it is meant for making us pure, well, there are different definitions of success on the spiritual path. Sometimes we may be given a amount of suffering that is unbearable for us, but through that suffering or through that test, We may fail, but if that failure makes us more humble, makes us realize the need for Krishna more, then that may well be a success. So sometimes people say God never tests us beyond our capacities. Well, I haven't seen any scriptural statement for that. It's a common statement, but there's a problem with that is that how can you make an absolute statement about God, what God will do and what God will not do? And second is how can we make an absolute statement about what our capacity is also? How much do we know our capacity? But the point is we just try to make whatever good choices we can within that situation. And ultimately Krishna will guide us forward. So his definition of success may be different from our definition of success. So sometimes we may go through, it's like, we look at the present and then we plan the future. This is our vision. But Krishna's vision is, Krishna looks at the future and then he plans the present. So, because of that, sometimes what might seem a failure at our level from this step to this step, that may actually be taking us forward. Okay, thank you. Yes, Prabhu. So I have written a few books. If any of you is leaving, you can just have a look at the books if you want. There's one new book on the mind. Just come. You are not your mind. You are better. So, apart from that, sorry?
One thing in this framework is that the magnitude of the vision of Krishna is also much.
Yes. Yeah, that is true. God sees far bigger and far better than us. Thank you. Good point. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much. You always take us to some different RAM and always give
Different?
very nice, different world and give very nice understanding of the scriptures as well as philosophy, everything combined. So Prabhuji, I have this question like in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, after Brahmaji is born and then he did austerity, Lord comes, Lord says tapa, he does austerity and then finally Lord give him knowledge and ask him to create both vidya and avidya. And Brahmaji started crying that I'm going to create avidya and lot of living entities are going to suffer because of that. So one like understanding I got is avidya is created because soul goes through the purification process and finally it's for soul's own good, right? But then Prabhuji, another question comes to the mind that Purnamidam, like anything, because Lord says, every soul is part and parcel of me. So if it is Purnamidam, everything is supposed to be perfect, then, where this balance get knocked off or, get unbalanced, where, the soul makes a bad choice and then, avidya has to be created so that, it goes through the purification. So I'm just trying to understand, like, is it because of the free will that he makes the bad choice or because of the bad choice like to correct it avidya is created.
Okay. So, why does the Lord instruct Brahmaji to create avidya? Because then through that so much suffering happens. So essentially the question is, where does this begin?
Yes.
Well, that question is like a intellectual banana peel. As soon as you step on it, you slip and fall. So my understanding of that is that overall we talk about humility in different ways. So humility in the intellectual domain means to accept that there are some things which we don't understand and which we may never understand. Now, this is something which even in other fields, for example, physics. Now, how quantum physics works is actually very complicated. There's one quantum physicist, he said that the universe is not only queerer than what we imagine, it is queerer than what we can imagine. So it is, the way things work are complicated. So these kind of questions are best approached with intellectual humility, that we may never be able to understand. Now, having said that, that does not mean that there is absolutely no understanding. There can be like a range of understandings, and different understandings may be more acceptable for different devotees. So the conventional understanding within Gaudiya Vaishnavism has been that this is anadi. It is beginningless. That verse 13, 21, 22 in the Gita, Purushya Prakriti Stohi. Before that, 13, what is 1320? Anad 1320 is, he's telling that both Prakriti and Purusha are anadi. Sorry? Prakritim Purusham Shaiva Vidya Anadi Ubhavapi. That both of them are anadi. So in the commentary to that, Baldev Devotion and Chakravarti Path both explain basically that the jiva's bondage is anadi. Now anadi, does it mean literally beginningless, or does it mean so far into the past that it's almost like beginningless? There can be different opinions about that. So whichever understanding makes sense for us, we can accept it. That somehow the jiva became jealous or whatever, and then came misuse the free will, or the jiva just exploring in a different way, or the jiva has always been here, and that, or the subject itself is inconceivable. So I would say that whichever explanation makes sense for us, we use that, and we move forward in our life. Thank you. Yes, bro. Okay. You have the mic here? Okay, you can take the mic. We'll come back to you. You can take the mic now. We'll go to him after, then we'll stop there.
Hare Krishna. Dhanvat Prabhuji, Jai Shri Prabhupada. So Prabhuji, the sloka, Nacha Matsthani Bhutani, right?
Pashyame Yogam Ishwaram. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a difference of what is explained there is there a difference between that and free will, or they are the same thing?
Nachabatsthani Bhutani means that all living beings, their actions are not attributable to me. That is the acknowledgement of free will, basically. Okay, thank you. Okay, last question.
So my question was about you explained very nicely how we have free will and the limitations of that, but why does Krishna give that free will in the first place when so many misuse it for their own?
I can answer that question when you become a parent. I'll explain what I mean by that. You know, many times when I travel across, many parents express concern about their children. Maybe children are making some unhealthy choices, they don't listen to them. So then I done this experiment. When I asked if the parents are having a lot of concerns or complaints about children, I asked them, would you like it if your child were replaced by a perfectly obedient robot? Well, many parents would like to have a robot, but not as a replacement to their child. Why? Because the robot cannot love. The robot may obey, but the robot cannot love. And the relationship of nurturing a child is based on love. We want the child to listen to us, but we want the child to willingly listen to us. Not that we want to force the child or we want to take away the free will of the child. So same way, Krishna wants the reciprocation of love. That is the very purpose of existence. And there is no possibility for the reciprocation of love, or there is no possibility for love itself if there is no free will. So that's why Krishna gives each one of us free will. And in fact, if you go further, it's a little bit, that usage itself, that Krishna has given us free will, it's more like a conventional usage. It's not necessarily a philosophically accurate usage, because it's the soul is eternally a part of Krishna. So if Krishna has free will, then the part of Krishna will also have free will. Now Krishna is unlimited, so his free will is unlimited. We are limited beings, so our free will is limited. So rather than saying that Krishna has given us free will, you can say that free will is inherent to our very existence as souls who are parts of Krishna. So it's not, and that is what enables us to experience love. So free will can lead us to distress, but it is free will itself that enables the experience of joy. If there were no free will, then we would just be like robots. So neither we would experience happiness nor Krishna would experience any happiness in the relationship with us. Okay? So thank you very much. Okay. श्रीमद् भगवद गीता की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय, गौर प्रेमानंदे।